In 1944, delegates from 44 nations met at Bretton Woods to rebuild a shattered world. America, rich and victorious, offered its dollar as the foundation of a new order. Gold would back the dollar would back global trust. Out of war's ashes, finance became America's greatest weapon, not tanks or bombs, but paper and promise. Bretton Woods tied every major currency to the US dollar, itself linked to gold at $35 an ounce. Nations accepted this elegant simplicity, money anchored to something real. For a world desperate for certainty, it was salvation. America's green paper, printed in confidence, became the pillar of post-war peace. Trust, not treasure, built the foundation of modern prosperity. Factories roared, ships sailed, and the dollar ruled. America produced half the world's goods and owned 2/3 of its gold. Europe rebuilt with U.S. loans. Japan with U.S. aid. Economic power replaced military conquest. For the first time, an empire was built not by occupation, but by credit. A paper empire glowing under industrial sunlight. Each dollar carried a golden oath, redeemable for metal on demand. Foreign central banks trusted it. Citizens believed it. In vaults from Paris to Tokyo, stacks of U.S. notes replaced bars of gold. What began as convenience became faith. A faith that would soon define global power. Britain's exhausted empire quietly bowed. The pound, once mighty, yielded to the dollar's strength. London's debt chained it to Washington's credit. Without war, without treaties, the throne of global finance passed hands. The world's future now spoke in American green. Through the Marshall Plan, U.S. dollars poured into ruined Europe. Bridges rebuilt, factories reopened, hope returned. It was generosity, but also strategy. Each crate of American aid bought loyalty, stability, and markets for decades. The dollar rebuilt not just nations, but an entire world order. From Bretton Woods came two new pillars, the IMF and the World Bank. Their purpose, to lend, stabilize, and manage crises. But behind their noble mission lay quiet influence, the spread of American control through loans, not armies. Credit became diplomacy. For war-torn nations, dollars meant hope. Rebuilt roads, humming factories, brighter futures. America's green paper became the ticket to recovery, capitalism's passport. In every corner of the world, the dollar represented freedom, faith, and modernity. But as dollars spread, America printed more. The link between paper and gold began to thin. Nations held faith, not metal. Beneath confidence lurked imbalance, a promise that could someday break. Empires often crumble when belief outweighs reality. By 1950, the dollar seemed immortal. Every trade, every debt, every dream rested on it. Yet power built on promises cannot last forever. As the world embraced the dollar's rule, few noticed the seeds of its eventual challenge, already sown in gold's silent shadow. By the 1950s, the dollar was everywhere, in banks, ports, and wallets across continents. It symbolized strength and order in a chaotic world. Nations measured their worth in U.S. currency. Global trade spoke one language. America had built an empire without colonies, ruling not by troops, but by trust in green paper. Prosperity bloomed. Suburbs rose. Factories thrived. Credit cards appeared. The world believed in America's endless wealth. Dollars moved as freely as dreams. Inflation was tame. Gold reserves solid. Optimism unshaken. It was the golden age, the moment before excess began. Europe and Japan rebuilt, yet their recovery deepened dependence on U.S. markets. Coca-Cola, Ford, and General Electric became global ambassadors. America exported more than goods. It exported lifestyle, culture, and belief in consumption. Every dollar spent abroad returned home multiplied. America's economic might intertwined with defense. The Cold War fueled factories as surely as peace once had. Each missile, jet, and ship added strength to the dollar's backbone. Global stability was built on spending, the paradox of security through debt. In Fort Knox, mountains of gold glowed behind locked steel. Yet each year, a little more left America, traded for imports, aid, and war. The world still trusted the $35 promise, but beneath the vault's quiet hum, the balance was shifting. By the 1960s, Charles de Gaulle warned that the dollar allowed America to buy the world with its own paper. France began demanding gold instead of dollars. Others watched quietly, wondering if the emperor's coin was real or illusion. Vietnam burned billions. The U.S. printed more dollars to fund war, welfare, and global dominance. But gold reserves could not keep pace. Abroad, confidence wavered. At home, inflation stirred. The empire's balance began to tilt. Central banks held mountains of U.S. paper, promises backed by fading gold. They hesitated to call America's bluff, fearing collapse. So the world pretended all was well. Every empire survives a little longer on denial. By 1968, nations quietly exchanged their dollars for gold. Shipments left New York vaults at night, bound for Paris and London. The illusion of control weakened. For the first time, America faced a financial siege, not from enemies, but from its own allies. By 1970, faith trembled. The dollar still reigned, but whispers grew louder. America was spending too much, printing too freely. Beneath prosperity's glitter, the foundation creaked. The age of paper perfection was nearing its fall. By 1971, America's gold reserves were bleeding away. Allies demanded metal, not paper. Nixon faced a choice: defend the dollar or defend the illusion. On August 15th, he closed the gold window, ending convertibility forever. Overnight, money became faith alone. The world awoke to a new reality. No currency was backed by gold. For centuries, wealth meant metal. Now it meant promises. Economists called it innovation. Others, betrayal. Humanity had stepped into uncharted financial territory, a civilization built entirely on belief. Markets trembled, inflation surged, oil prices exploded. The dollar wobbled but did not fall. It adapted. America's power now came not from reserves, but from momentum. When faith became currency, confidence was the new gold. In secret meetings with Saudi Arabia, the US made a deal. Oil would be sold only in dollars. Every nation now needed greenbacks to buy energy. Gold had lost its shine, but oil gave the dollar new life. The empire found its next anchor: black gold. The 1970s became an age of rising prices and restless hope. Households watched savings shrink. Governments borrowed more to stay afloat. Yet amid chaos, Wall Street learned a powerful lesson: volatility could be profitable. The paper age had its priests. Currencies began to float freely. Exchange rates danced daily, no longer chained to gold or government decree. Economists called it freedom. Traders called it opportunity. Money became an ocean, deep, unpredictable, and endlessly tradable. Freed from gold's weight, money could multiply infinitely. Banks invented new instruments, derivatives, futures, swaps. Financial engineering replaced metallurgy. The alchemy of paper became the new gold rush. By late 1970s, America's chaos began to stabilize. Volcker at the Fed raised interest rates brutally, breaking inflation's back. Pain restored faith. The world accepted the dollar's dominance again, not because it was perfect, but because no rival could match its reach. Freed from gold, the dollar became limitless. It could fund wars, debt, dreams, and deficits, and still reign supreme. America had discovered a paradox. The less real its money became, the more powerful it grew. By 1980, the world had accepted the unthinkable. Value existed because people believed it did. The dollar had transcended gold, becoming pure trust. Empires once fell for losing metal. Now, they would fall for losing faith. Subscribe to Finance Through History, where money's past reveals the truth behind every modern crisis. The 1980s turned borrowing into virtue. Households, companies, and governments learned that debt was not danger, it was growth. America discovered how to live beyond means, yet appear richer than ever. The dollar thrived not on savings, but on promises. Tax cuts, deregulation, and credit expansion fueled a roaring decade. Wall Street became a temple of optimism. The mantra was simple: spend, borrow, invest, repeat. The market soared, and America believed it had found a formula for endless prosperity. Credit cards spread faster than any currency in history. Americans bought with plastic, not cash. Consumption became identity, debt, a lifestyle. The nation of savers turned into a nation of spenders, united by belief in tomorrow's paycheck. In the late 1980s, Japan rose as an economic miracle, buying U.S. buildings, banks, and icons. Americans feared losing dominance. Yet when Japan's bubble burst, the dollar stood firm. It was a warning. Even miracles depend on faith. The 1990s brought computers, global markets, and instant finance. Capital moved at light speed. Borders blurred. The dollar became the bloodstream of globalization, pumping life through every trade, every screen. Technology had made money immortal. Financial engineers created derivatives, bets on bets, promises on promises. Risk was repackaged, sold, and celebrated. Banks called it innovation. Critics called it illusion. Profit grew faster than understanding. The system became both brilliant and blind. By 2000, every major nation's banks held dollars. Emerging economies borrowed in it. Corporations traded with it. The U.S. could print what others had to earn. It was empire perfected, power without conquest, tribute without armies. Low interest rates and easy credit made Americans feel richer than kings. Homes doubled in value. Stocks tripled. But beneath the euphoria, leverage spiraled. Paper profits hid real fragility. Empires built on belief always forget gravity. Then came collapse. Housing prices crashed. Banks imploded. Panic spread. The same faith that built the dollar empire now shattered overnight. Wall Street's temples went dark. The world learned again. Nothing built on credit is truly safe. Yet, when the dust settled, nations still fled to the dollar. America printed trillions to rescue markets, and the world accepted it. Faith had broken, yet dependence deepened. The dollar had survived its own funeral. After 2008, trust in the dollar shook. Nations watched America bail out banks with printed money. To many, it felt like deceit disguised as wisdom. From Moscow to Beijing, leaders whispered the same question. Why should one country control everyone's wealth? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa formed BRICS, a new alliance promising balance. They dreamed of trade without dependence, of currency beyond Washington's reach. It was not yet rebellion, but resistance, a quiet seed of a multipolar world. China began internationalizing its currency, signing swap lines, opening markets, and buying gold. Factories powered by cheap labor now fueled monetary dreams. The yuan sought respect and a seat beside the dollar at the world's table. Russia, weary of sanctions and debt, turned back to gold. Its central bank filled vaults with yellow metal, silent defiance against paper power. For Moscow, gold was more than security. It was sovereignty in tangible form. From Brazil to Africa, nations tired of dollar swings and debt traps, they wanted trade settled in their own currencies, their own destiny. The South began to speak, not in English, but in economics. As technology surged, cryptocurrencies emerged, borderless, untamed, ungoverned. To some, they were liberation. To others, anarchy. Bitcoin challenged the very idea that money needed nations at all. The dollar faced a rival, born of code, not gold. The US began freezing foreign assets and cutting rivals from its payment networks. Power once hidden became open coercion. The dollar was not just currency, it was control, and the world took note. Tariffs, currency manipulation, and digital espionage defined the late 2010s. The dollar stood firm, but enemies multiplied. In markets and ministries, the new war had no bullets, only spreadsheets. The BRICS nations launched their own banks and clearing systems, quietly bypassing the dollar. They were not strong enough to replace it yet, but the idea mattered more than success. Every empire begins as imagination. By 2020, the dollar still reigned, but the faith was thinner. America's debt soared, trust eroded, and competitors circled. The empire of paper still glittered, but even gold-painted walls can crumble from within. In 2020, the world stopped. Governments printed trillions to fight the invisible enemy. Money became medicine, comfort, survival. But every dollar created out of thin air carried a silent cost: the erosion of faith. The virus ended many things, including the illusion of fiscal restraint. When the world reopened, prices roared. Food, fuel, and shelter. Everything cost more. The same governments that saved economies now feared what they'd unleashed. History had repeated its lesson. You can print currency, but not value. The rich grew richer, assets soared, and the poor paid the hidden tax of inflation. Money flowed uphill while faith flowed away. The promise of equality, once America's pride, now felt like an overdraft. As confidence in paper faltered, gold returned to headlines and vaults. Central banks bought at record pace, quietly admitting what they'd denied for decades: that true wealth still shines in metal, not ink. Nations raced to launch central bank digital currencies. Programmable money promised efficiency and control. Freedom and surveillance merged into one glowing code. The next empire would not be physical, but digital. Scandals, debt ceilings, political chaos, all chipped away at the foundation of belief. For centuries, people trusted governments to protect value. Now, many turned to gold, crypto, or nothing at all. Faith, once abundant, had become scarce. In 2023, BRICS announced new plans: a currency backed by gold and trade, not debt. The idea shook markets. Whether it succeeds or not, it declared a truth. The age of blind faith in the dollar was over. The United States still holds the world's deepest markets, strongest military, and loudest culture, but not unquestioned trust. The dollar remains the world's habit, not its conviction. Power now depends on character more than currency. History moves in cycles. Gold becomes paper, paper becomes code, code seeks faith, and faith returns to gold. Every age believes it has mastered value, until the next collapse reminds it otherwise. The dollar empire may fade, but the lesson will not. Empires rise and fall, currencies come and go, but value remains what humanity believes in. The dollar was never just money, it was an idea, that freedom and trust can power a world. When faith shifts, power follows. Subscribe to Finance Through History, where every crisis reminds us that money is temporary, but belief is eternal.